March 22nd, 1980. Here we are in the Berkeley Hills. The old interviewer is about to interview Grandma Browne and trace out all the horse thieves and pirates in our family tree. So, let me begin. Mom, when and where were you born?
Well, I was born in a house up along the bend of the river up in the mountains back of Tuolumne.
What date?
September 20th, 1907.
And what were your mother's and father's names? First, what was Grandma's maiden name?
Her name was Lily Mae Belknap.
B-E-L-K-N-A-P.
Yes.
And your father?
My father was John Edward Davis.
And when and where were they born,
Well,
as best you know?
My father was born in Greenfield, Illinois, and he was the youngest of 12 children. And when he was approximately 11 years old, his father sold out his business in Greenfield, loaded everybody in a covered wagon, and headed for California.
And about what year was he born? Do you recall? Or when did they come to California?
Well, he died in 1920. He was 75. So he was born in about 45. And it was about 56 when they came.
Before the Civil War.
Yeah.
So, Mother, your dad came west to California in about 1856. And his father had a livery stable in Illinois.
Yes.
And do you recall any of the names of his brothers and sisters?
There was Lester and Cater.
Those are his brothers?
Older brothers.
Yeah.
And Dan. And
Was he one of the older or younger children?
he was the youngest.
He was the youngest of
Yeah.
12.
And the sisters, there was Louise, Mary, Olive, I don't remember the other names. I used to, but I've forgotten.
Okay.
And it was interesting, they were all big people. My aunts must have been, 5'7" or 5'8".
How tall was your dad?
He was about, he must have been close to 6 feet when he was younger. Because he was 75 years old when he died, and I was only 13. And by then he was getting shorter like all of us old people.
Yeah.
But I have pictures of him, a few of when he was younger, and he must have been, I don't know, might have been 5'11" or 6 feet, something like that. He was a fairly large man. My uncles were all big men. Uncle Kate must have been 6'4" and weighed 300 pounds.
Oh, right.
And Dan was 6 foot, 2 or 3.
Do you remember what his parents' names were?
Yes.
Or anything
his
about
father's name was John, or was Returney Daves. I don't know his middle name. And his mother's name was Mary Connolly before she was married.
Her maiden name.
Her maiden name.
How do you spell Returney?
Returne.
Returney.
And as far as I know, that's the way they pronounce it. That's what, Returney, not return.
And were they immigrants, or had their parents
No.
been born here?
I'm kind of fuzzy about. They weren't immigrants. Their parents had come from Ireland and settled somewhere in the East Coast. I don't know. They may have fought in the Revolutionary War, for all I know.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something vaguely, I remember from when I was a little kid, that their name was O'Day in Ireland. And many of the Irish, when they came here, dropped the O from their name, and it evolved into Dave's.
What was your dad like? Can you remember at all? What do you recall? What kind of person was he?
He was a lot like Dan.
Yeah.
He was a very gregarious, friendly person. He had lots and lots of friends, and he was a sort of a, well, he was Irish.
Yeah.
All Irish, and he must have been at one time in his life, and of course this was, earlier, he must have been fairly successfully. I don't know. He apparently made some good strikes. He was prospecting, mining, all of his younger life, as far as I know. And because at the time, well, it was before Roy was born, naturally, but then he had a livery stable in Los Gatos. That's what the street's named after him. That was the road going to his livery stable. And I can remember him telling me stories about the big house he had in Los Gatos. He used to have Chinese servants and a fancy carriage. And of course, this is when he met, which was kind of a romantic thing, Roy's mother.
That was his first wife.
Yeah. She was...
What was her name?
The first name was Mary, and I don't know what the last name was. It was her and her two brothers. The parents had died, and they inherited this Spanish land grant. All of the land around Cupertino, all through there, that was all one Spanish grant. Anyway, she was apparently only 18 or 19 or something like that. At that time, you had to be over 21 to get married or anything. So, to get married, he chartered a ship out of San Francisco to go out and sail out 3 miles and had the captain marry them. And I don't have it. Don has it's a big scroll, and what it is a wedding certificate, and it's somebody, the captain's name, and I've forgotten his name, and did on this day join in the holy wedlock, John, Edward Daves, and Mary, somebody or other, on the ship SS something or other, outside the 3-mile limits from San Francisco. That's very interesting. Run into Don settled her and she asked to see it. It's an interesting thing. Elvis had it and she gave it to him.
And they had, what, one child? Or one?
They have, well, Roy was a twin. And the other one died, well, at the same time, must have been about 4 years old. And I can't remember what they died of, whether it was diphtheria or scarlet fever.
2 boys?
Yeah, 2 boys, and their mother died. Died then.
So Roy was born around when?
Well,
what year was that? He was older than you by quite a bit.
He must have been born around 1880, somewhere around in there, because he was almost my mother's age.
And when did he die?
Well, he died about 20 years ago. He died.
He must have died when I was in high school.
58, and he died in 1960. And this was interesting, he was sort of a nonconformist. He would have fit it right in with the people nowadays.
Yeah.
But then, I can remember when I was a little kid, and he belonged to the IWWs.
Yeah.
And
the Wobblies.
Yeah, the Wobblies. And he'd always go around singing some Wobbly songs. And he used to write, though.
Yeah.
Did
he ever get married?
No, he never married. He was, I guess, very much in love with somebody when he was younger, and she died of diphtheria or something. A lot of those things kill people then, and so he never married. But he used to, the way he earned his living, he wrote short stories and articles, and I've been trying to remember the name of the magazine that most of his stories were printed in. It's out of print now, but it's one of these old ones. It was something like Harper's, only it was a small magazine then, or all of them were. They were small. But I remember him writing these short stories, outdoor type stories, adventure stories.
Yeah.
And when he used to go back in the mountains up there every summer, up Camp 8, just about where I was born, and the place where my dad had built a log cabin, a very big log cabin, and this is, they had made a very rich strike there. And then there'd been a cave-in, and Roy used to go up there summers and work. And when he, shortly before he died, he was losing his eyesight. I don't know just what it was, but he was going blind. And this last year, he went back up there, and his friends, he lived down near Gilroy, then his friends tried to talk him out of it because he wasn't, they didn't think it was safe for him to be up there alone, but he insisted. So someone or other took him up there and left his camping stuff there. And apparently, he had a stroke, something, when he was there alone. And so they got worried and investigated. And it was earlier than that, because it was 1957. It was the year that I came up here from Long Beach. And so then they found his body up there under a pine tree.
As good a way to go as any.
Yeah, under a pine tree. And, you know, he wouldn't go to I guess shortly the year before he died, he spent part of the time in a home near Gilroy because he was almost blind. But he talked somebody into taking him back to the mountains there because that's where he wanted to go, and that's where he died.
Well, when did your dad marry again then?
Well,
marry Grandma?
Must have been about 1898, 99.
Well, when was Elvis
No, wait
born?
a minute.
See, how much older was Elvis?
Well,
Thelma.
Willis was
Willis
9
was
years
oldest.
older than I am.
So
So I
he
was
was
born in
born
1907. He was born in
1898.
98, and he was just a little baby. He was only 6 months old when my mother married my dad. So that's when they were married. And with her, you know.
Wait, now was Willis her child?
Yeah.
Oh, was he born before they were married?
Yeah, he was 6 months old.
Oh,
She was
I
in
see.
San Jose, and she was alone, and
Oh,
she wasn't alone,
she
but-
wasn't your dad's. How did he come? Can you clarify this now?
Oh, he met her in San Jose.
Yeah, but where did Willis come from? Uncle
Oh,
Willis.
well, now, you want me to start on my mother's history?
Yeah, okay.
I'll-
Back up a little bit.
All right, now, they came from Virginia, the Belknaps.
Okay.
And
When, or about,
I don't
they came
know.
to Oregon, didn't they?
They came to Oregon, and I don't remember, I didn't write the dates down, but if you ever look in a Rid Pass history of Oregon, there's a little paragraph in there about my mother's grandmother coming to Oregon, and the first something or other about them sailing around the Cape, and apparently they brought practically their whole house from Virginia or wherever. And also, well, the reason for the article was the first bishop to visit the West Coast, you know, Oregon.
This
and
Episcopalian? Or?
Yes, came and stayed with them, visited them or
I see.
something. And they settled in the Willamette Valley.
Willamette, yeah.
Willamette?
Around Portland.
Yeah. No, it's around, it's inland.
Well,
They had a ranch.
south of there, yeah, that
Yeah.
goes in.
And anyway, they had a ranch there, and apparently they were a fairly well-to-do family, because my mother, when she was 16 or 17 or something, apparently became enamored of this Welshman. There was a Welsh family, all apparently, well, they were settlers. They all lived in a big log house, big family. And so she ran away and got married, and her parents disowned her. This was something, and I guess it was something way beneath her, because I can remember her telling me some of the stories about how she thought it was so horrible, this whole family living in this one house, and they had a loft, steps go up to the loft, and that's where half a dozen of them slept, and she'd been used to a room of her own, and and also she had been going to a teacher's college, and apparently, I don't remember, his name was John Banta, and they were Welsh. And of course, my mother's family was English, and they look down on the Welshmen and Irishmen and all the rest of them. But he had no education apparently to mount anything, whereas she did. And of course, the marriage didn't last very long. And her mother, my grandmother and grandfather were coming to California, so they just gathered her up and brought her along. They apparently had the marriage annulled because she was underage. Now, incidentally, the John Banta, my brother traced him sometime after he was grown, and he lives in Canada and has a ranch in Canada. He did. This was 30 years ago or 40 years ago or something. Yeah, but he has a ranch.
This was her husband?
Yeah,
John Banta?
Willis's father.
Yeah.
Yeah, he traced him, and he lives in Canada.
So Willis, so his name was?
Well, my father adopted him. He was Dave's, Willis Dave's. He never used the name Banta.
He used Banta.
No.
He was born in 1898 then.
Who, my brother?
Willis.
Yeah, he was 9 years older than...
Or 10, no, 1897?
Yeah, 1898. He was 9 years older.
How old was Thelma compared to you?
Well, Thelma was, she was born in 1900.
So, let's see, so your dad married your mom?
Yeah, in 98 about.
Around 98?
Yeah. Well, 99 it was, because Willis was
And
born
how old
in
was
September.
she then about when she got married to him? 18, 19?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
And so, then their first child was Aunt Thelma.
Oh, Thelma, yeah.
What was Thelma's middle name?
Huh?
What was her middle name? She'd like it.
Dire secret. Her name was Mabel Thelma.
Well, Mabel Thelma.
Yeah.
Thelma was her middle name. I didn't
Yeah,
know
that's
that.
it. She hated Mabel.
She didn't like Mabel.
Yeah, when she was a little tiny girl, they called her Mabel, but as soon as she was, I don't know, 7 years old or 8 years old, they started calling her Thelma.
She always went by that. I didn't know her name was Mabel.
She hated that name.
She would have been a good Mabel, I thought. I like the name Mabel myself now.
Yeah, well,
Well,
she
then,
didn't like
so
that.
she was born in 1900?
1900, and Elvis was born in 1903. There's
What
2.5
was Elvis's
years.
middle name?
Elvis, Anna, after my grandmother. My grandmother was Anna Belknap.
Oh, that Belknap.
Yeah, my mother's mother. Yeah. Anna, and my grandfather's name was Harvey.
Harvey Belknap.
Yeah. Now, she was English.
Didn't they live in Coos Bay or somewhere down in the southern Oregon? No.
No, they lived in Los Gatos all the while that I knew them.
Oh, I see.
But
They were of English.
she was English. He was Dutch. He was immigrated
Belknap,
through Canada.
Dutch.
Yeah, from Holland. His parents did.
How about, do you know any of the other family names beyond them? Their parents or any?
No, I don't know any. Only that their name was Lister.
Lister, was
Yeah.
that on the mother?
My grandmother's.
On the maternal side?
That's on the maternal side.
Lister,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember you said they were related.
Yeah. That was my
Miss
grandmother. Was a
Lister.
very patrician-looking person. She was again tall.
Yeah.
She must, I don't know exactly, she must have been 5'7" or 8", and very erect. I can remember I was scared to death of her when I was a little kid. She was very thin, had white hair, and she was always just dressed beautifully, and I don't think she ever touched me. You know, I wasn't kind that you go and climb in her lap or something, and still she was, you know, she must have been nice because I liked her.
Yeah.
But she was the one that was very proud of her history, and too bad I don't know more of it. But I know they were related to some the families in England, you know, that like Lord Lister and some of those. She was, and apparently they were. Her family was a more or less aristocratic family.
What was Elvis's middle name?
Anna. After her.
Anna, oh yeah, and she was born when?
Well, let's see, she's 2.5 years older than I am, so she was born about 1904, I think.
And let's see, Thelma died in 1963. When we were in Japan, right?
Yeah.
63.
Yeah.
And how did you get your middle name? Lois Sunshine
I often
Grace.
wondered about that, and I asked my mother, and she said, well, I don't know where they got the Lois, because even then it was an unusual name.
Yeah,
But
no.
my mother must have been reading a story or something.
Yeah.
And neighbor came in, this is a story my mother told me. A neighbor came in and said, "Oh, such a happy little child, like a ray of sunshine."
So
And
there's
you ought to
your
name her
sunshine.
Sunflower there. And that, you know, in that day and age, in 1907, to name a child Sunshine
Well,
was...
Sunny is not a bad thing.
Yeah, but nowadays, but then they
Yeah.
didn't name kids that.
Well, if you were born outside Tuolumne, it must not have been in a hospital.
No hospital, no doctor,
Oh,
and as
is
far
it
as I
just
know,
a-
my birth wasn't recorded.
Is that right? What
Yeah,
year?
they didn't bother then. I mean,
Was
after
it
all,
just
you
in
have a
log
baby.
cabin or something, huh?
Well, it was the
Mining?
the last time I was up there was about 1920, and the house was still standing there. It's right on a bend of the river up at what they call Camp 8, the lumber camp, Camp 8, and you can see that you go over a trestle, the train did. You look down, and down along the river was the house, and that was where I was born. But no, they didn't bother then. They might, but I doubt it. You know, I mean, here you were 8-10 miles out of town, and who's going to bother going in and recording the birth of a baby? Because you might not get into town very often.
Did Grandma have any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, she had one sister, and I remember her visiting several times when I was a little kid. She lived in San Francisco, and she was married, and she had no children. And I don't know when she died. She died sometime. She was older, I think, than my mother, and she died
When did Grandma die? When we lived in...
in 1947. Yeah, she
yeah,
died.
that was about the year I
Yeah.
graduated from high school.
Yeah, 1947. And she had a brother, Carl, and I don't know, still don't know what he died of, but he died when he was only 20-something. And going back to Roy, when I was a little kid, I just idolized Roy because he would tell me stories and have the little man come out of the inkwell and things like that, you know. And I was reading after he died. They gave me some of his papers, and I was reading through this diary. And around in well, I don't know just when it was, somewhere in there. Apparently there was a depression, and it was 1907 or something. It was very difficult. He was a young man. He used to do surveying work, and the little items in his little notebook there about how he was going to go and survey some place near Salinas, and he was hoping to get some other surveying job, and he lived in San Francisco, and he would work from there apparently, you know, doing surveying.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in San Francisco at the time of the earthquake, and said, kind of funny, there was kind of funny little notation about how it shook him out of bed.
Yeah. Well, where did you live then when you were a girl? You were born in Tuolumne.
Yeah, and sometime apparently when I was about 3 or 4, we moved down into Tuolumne, and this was at some time around in there. My father was injured some way or other, and I can't remember. I don't know enough about it except that it was something to do with a wagon and a load. Maybe it tipped over on him or something, for all I know. And we moved into Tuolumne, and my mother opened a boarding house.
And so you lived there. Of course,
Yeah.
that's a pretty small town, isn't it?
Yeah, this logging town. Well, mining and logging, but it was a great town for kids because there were burros. You know, the miners would in the wintertime would turn their burros loose there. Sometimes they'd gather them up in the summer, and sometimes they didn't. And all these burros wandering around. In fact, they still do that. Last time I was up through there, you can still see burros wandering around.
Is that right?
Just loose, don't belong to anyone. And we used to catch a burro, you know, any old burro, especially one old swayback burro.
Go riding.
Ride them around, yeah. And
I think, let me check this machine. I like doing this.
This
This kind
is
of bit of
kinda
fun.
fun, yeah.
I should, okay, see, I gotta need more time. Hold on, I'm gonna check this.
7 or 8 or 9, I can remember my dad telling me stories about when he came across the plains and the Indians. There's one story, especially. There was a boy on the wagon train, apparently about 15, 16, 18 years old, that was very loudmouthed, and he was going to shoot the first Indian he saw. Well, they got out on the plain somewhere or other, and he saw an Indian all right, but it happened to be a woman. He shot her. And that night, the Indians came, apparently the head or chiefs or the men came, and they told them that they would either turn the boy over to them or they would massacre the whole wagon train. And it's a fairly large wagon train, mostly, well, it was practically all families, women and children. So apparently they had a meeting, I guess, and decided that in the interest of all, the only thing they could do was to give the boy to the Indians, because naturally they didn't approve of what the boy did anyway. So they did, and apparently the Indians were camped right close, because they could hear them throughout the night. And the next morning, when they were ready to leave, and they went past, I guess, where the Indians were, and the Indians were gone, but the boy was left. And they tied him to a stake and skinned him. And that was what was left of him. But I guess it was a good lesson to anyone else to not take pot shots at Indians. And also, my dad used to play fiddle. I remember sitting in the kitchen and him playing the fiddle, just, you know, what you played then. It wasn't a violin, you played a fiddle. And he'd play all these old songs. And my mother used to get mad at him. She couldn't stand that squeaky thing. I can remember that when I was just 5 years old or so.
Tell me about your life as a girl. When you moved to San Jose, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
How old were you? Did you go to school? How old
First,
were
when
you?
we left Browne, it was in the springtime, and Elvis and Thelma had gone to spend the summer with my grandmother in Los Gatos, and we were leaving Browne, and we came to San Francisco, and I can remember Willis and I, we came from Stockton or Sacramento, I don't know which, on a paddle wheel boat down to San Francisco. That's how you travel to San Francisco then. And we lived in San Francisco just maybe a month, 2 months, I guess. I don't know exactly. I was only 6 years old, but I remember visiting my aunt. I remember my cousins. She had, I don't know how many now, some boys and girls, and I remember them taking me out on the flats digging clams.
In the bay?
Yeah, somewhere there. And I can remember the place we lived. We lived in an apartment on Van Ness Avenue and had gas lights.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
This would have been around when? You
Well,
were
I was
old?
6, but 1913.
1913.
It had gas lights.
Yeah.
And I remember something that stayed with me all my life. I remember my mother gave me a dime or something. I don't know where. She said I could go to a show. And I walked on Market Street, which was only 2 blocks away or something. and went to this show, and it was showing Dandy's Inferno.
Yeah.
Cost a nickel to get in.
Yeah.
And that gave me nightmares for 20 years, that thing, that movie. It must have been a really impressive movie to affect me that way. That's one of the things I remember of San Francisco. And then we moved to San Jose.
How old were you then?
Well, it was we only stayed
Shortly.
in San Francisco 2 months, I think, and then we moved to San Jose. And we were in San Jose then. From the time I was 6, I started school there until I was 14. And I can remember, the first we lived sort of on the outskirts of town, had a great big huge yard sort of, and Willis raised pigeons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Did your dad have a livery?
No,
Plus,
no, he was
working?
off in the prospecting.
Did your mother have a boarding
My-
house or?
No,
anything?
my mother.
No, you just lived there.
Yeah, she worked, but at the beginning, I don't know what she did. The first I remember was, I guess I was about 9, and she worked as housekeeper. Yeah. Well, anyway, she was housekeeper for this, whoever's the head of the observatory at Mount Hamilton.
Mm.
Because I used to go up there and spend time.
You
get
didn't
to
live
look
there?
at the-
Did she just go up there during the day?
No, she lived there.
Oh, she lived there?
Yeah, she
Where
lived
did you
there.
live?
I was up there with her
Oh, you lived there
for part of
too,
the time.
oh.
But this time, we had, as far as I know, it was a cousin of my father's.
Now, where did you live? Where?
We lived on...
On Mount Hamilton? Oh, no, he
in
wasn't
San
up there.
Jose.
Oh,
No.
in San Jose.
Elvis and Thelma were going to school, and we had a cousin of my father's, Aunt Lucy, we called her, although she was a cousin, I think.
Yeah.
And she was a funny little dumpling of a person, red hair, Irish as could be, and she kept house while my mother was working up there. She stayed with us. Apparently she was an old maid, and I don't know what, but she kept house or took care of us while mother was up there. And at this time, my father,
Well, did you live at the house of this man, or not?
during the summers, I lived up at Mount Hamilton for 2 years.
Oh,
Yeah, we got to look through the telescopes.
you did? Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And
Well, did Grandma live up there all year round? You
2
guys
years.
lived, and you lived down in the
Yeah.
town?
And at
Of
this
San
time,
Jose.
my father wasn't well. At the time when he'd had this wagon tipped on him or whatever happened with it, he got a double hernia, which was kind of serious at that time, and so he couldn't do anything in the way of heavy work. Of course, he was up, past 60 or something.
Yeah.
then. So I don't really know too much of what he did. I know that he was off prospecting or something. And then about this time is when World War II started. And Willis went in the Army. He was just 17 or 18, I guess. And he joined the Army. And then, let's see, Thelma was just about out of high school then. Al was right behind her. And no sooner out of high school than they got married.
I did.
Yeah.
Who'd they marry?
Thelma married a soldier. She met, there was a big camp at Menlo Park. Camp Menlo.
Yeah.
Huge army camp. And there were soldiers all over the place.
She was really good looking,
Oh,
wasn't
she was very
like
pretty. Yeah,
glamorous.
she was really beautiful when she was especially younger.
She always was very
Yeah.
attractive.
And anyway, so there she married him. And then...
And what was his name?
Robidoux, William Robidoux. His parents were born in France, settled in Rhode Island.
That was Jean's dad.
Yeah.
Did he spell his name Robidoux?
Eaux.
Eaux.
Yeah. And then somewhere along the line, he dropped the X off.
I see. Jean finally put it back, didn't
Yeah,
he?
Gene finally put it back,
Yeah.
but they dropped the X off because he thought it looked too foreign or something.
see.
And then for a while he kind of simplified it and put IOU or something, but
I see.
he'd fiddle around with his name and just
I see.
however he happened to think it looked best. And he was on the stage
Oh, was
in
he?
between our army, or before the
What
army.
did he do? Dance?
Dance and sing.
Yeah.
And he was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I can remember, when I was 14 or 15, he was going to teach me how to dance, and we were going to go on the stage.
They just
Did.
had one child. Gene was
Yeah.
born in 1923, as I
Yeah.
recall.
1920.
No, 23, because he's 7 years older than I am.
Well, no, it has to be before then, because he was walking when I was married. I was married in January 1924. I guess it was married.
Yeah, he
January
was born in
23rd.
August of 1923.
No, he had to be older than that. 1922.
Maybe 22.
Yeah, because he was about a year and a half old when I got married.
Well, then they got divorced.
Yeah, they got divorced. And
She never married again, did
never
she?
married again, no. And she regretted ever,
Being divorced. Huh?
yeah, because it was something that could have been worked out.
Yeah.
But, it was,
Well, when did Alvis marry?
then Elvis married just, about a year earlier, 1919, I guess is when she got married.
She married Lloyd Tice.
Lloyd, yeah, he was in the Marines.
Tice, he was in the Marines. All
Yeah.
those guys in their uniforms.
Yeah,
Huh?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And because Ray was born, I think, in 1920. He was the first.
They had two children, Don and
Yeah.
Ray. Ray born in 1920, and
And Don in
Don is-
1922, I think.
no, Don is a
23.
year younger than Gene.
Yeah, well, then he was born in 23. As Ray was born in August of 1920, and he was the first baby I'd ever encountered. Oh, I thought he was the most wonderful thing in the world.
Yeah. Well, when did you quit school? When you were around 14? What happened there?
Yeah, well, I got smallpox
When was that?
when I was 14.
14?
About. Yeah.
Smallpox. Gee, that sounds like
Smallpox.
from the dark ages. You don't think of getting that anymore.
Yeah, well, somebody off of the came into San Francisco, and Lloyd at that time was out of the Army. He was working as stevedore in San Francisco, and this is what they assumed, that somebody got off the ship that was either
Had
a
it.
carrier or had it, because Ray got it, and Albus was quarantined,
That's a pretty
and they
serious
had been
disease.
down to visit us, and I got it.
You got it. So then you stayed
And
home
I
when
was
you were sick?
out of school for a long time. 'Cause I really had it bad.
You're lucky you didn't ever have any pox marks.
Yeah, well, I got a few, but
Yeah.
luckily of course, I was young, and as you get older, they sort of fade away. You used to have some that were very visible.
Yeah.
And so when, this time, I don't know what was going on with my mother and father. My mother was working, of course, and I don't know, my father was with Roy, or I don't know just what, I don't know what the situation was. But when I got out, or as soon as I started to get well, I went to stay with Thelma. Thelma and Billy lived near Fresno then. And
Go ahead, what were you saying?
I don't remember now.
Let's see. You were saying, well,
Oh, I
your
went.
mother and
Oh, I
father,
went
they
to
kind of
stay
lived
with.
apart. Did
Yeah.
they have not too close a relationship at that time?
I
you
guess
think?
so. There was 35 years difference
In age, yeah.
And I don't know.
So after you got sick, you didn't ever go back to
So
school?
no,
for that
and I
thing?
went down and stayed with Thelma. She lived in Fresno, and she was pregnant at that time. I remember that. And that's why she wanted to know if I could come and stay with her, because they were living outside of Fresno. Billy was cooking for some railroad or some construction company.
You were around, what, 14?
I must have been about 14 then. And so then shortly before Gene was born, in fact, we moved to San Francisco. And I remember Billy got a job on a boat, lumber boat going up to Oregon. And so we lived in...
He had worked as a cook.
Yeah, that's what he did. He worked as a cook, because he cooked in the Army, I guess. And anyway, he got a job there, and my mother was working in San Francisco. No, she wasn't either. She was working in Alvarado, one of the salt places, cooking for
Alvarado?
boarding.
Alvarado?
Yeah, it's called Alvarado's down towards San Jose. It's
Alviso.
No.
Well, I know Alvarado. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because she cooked there in a boarding house for the salt employees. They lived there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I lived in San Francisco. Oh, I don't know. We had a flat out on California Street, way out by the Presidio.
And who were you living with then?
Thelma. And my mother would be home.
Thelma had been
Elvis
president
was
when she
married.
came up.
Huh?
I see, yeah.
And Thelma was pregnant. And then that was the summer that I went on to spend up in Tuolumne with Roy when I was about 15.
But you didn't then ever go back to school?
Really went back to school.
How come?
And I wanted to.
You did?
Well,
Just moving around or one thing or
moving
another?
around and I've thought about this a lot because I wanted to go so badly, and I didn't. Kids then didn't have initiative to do things on their own, and apparently everybody was so involved in their own problems and their own lives. And
So about what grade did you go through at school?
8th grade.
8th grade.
Yeah. And I was good in school
Oh, yeah?
because they.
Nancy would be good at crossword puzzles
I
now.
was very good in math.
Yeah.
And they were going to skip me for the last half of the 8th grade and right
Yeah.
into high school because I was ahead, doing so well. And this is what I wanted so badly.
Yeah.
I guess that's why I had such a mania pounding into you when you were 4 years old that you had 20 years of school ahead of you.
Well, when did you meet Dad?
Oh, then after
Or how did
I
you-
spent the summer up in Tuolumne with Roy, when I came back, my mother had bought this restaurant in Bay Point, which is Port Chicago now. She bought this restaurant, and so that's where I came back to. And of course, I had to work then. I couldn't go to school because I had to work and help her because she needed help. She cooked and I waited on the table. And your dad was another fellow. It was toss-up which one I was going to fall for, because the other one looked like Errol Flynn,
Yeah.
sort of, tall and handsome.
What did Dad look like then?
Well, you've seen pictures of him about that. He was very Irish. Had a lot of Irish blarney.
He sort of had
and husky and dark
brown,
curly
dark
hair.
curly hair.
Yeah, a lot of dark curly hair, and kissed the Blarney Stone. And
Yeah.
anyway, they were coming through looking for work. There was a depression on that. And there'd be a lot of fellows get off a freight train or something. And there was a lumber yard there in Bay Point, and they
This
tried
was
to
around
find work.
1923, huh?
It was 1922, to be exact. And anyway, I met him in the restaurant. They came in to get something to eat, and that's where I met him. And along with a lot of others, I used to meet soldiers that were discharged here at the Presidio. Soldiers coming back from the Philippines. They had lots of soldiers in the Philippines then, apparently.
Yeah.
And they'd come back and start riding a train, which is, hoboing. They'd get on a freight train or something, heading back for wherever they came from. And I remember this one bunch that got off, they were all still in uniform. And there were two of them, one from Pennsylvania, one from Texas, and the other two from Montana. And of course, I was right in my glory then. I went out with each one of them different times, and they all wanted me to go run off with them. One go to Texas, his father had a ranch, another one to Montana or somewhere, and they had a cattle ranch, the other one to Pennsylvania, and of course I was right in my glory. All these people I was situated in a restaurant where they all came in to eat, and I could pick and choose.
Well, how long did
Anyway.
you know Dad before you got married?
Oh,
Was it a
well, he
whirlwind
came in,
romance?
let's see, it must have been the springtime when he stopped there, and he got a job in the lumber mill. And then it was January, the following January, I guess about 8-9 months.
When did you get married?
In January 23rd, 1924.
1924.
Yeah. And I was, the September before that, I was 16.
Where did you get married? Did you get
In
the
the
Justice of
home.
Peace?
We lived in we lived in an apartment above the drugstore, and the druggist was the Justice of the Peace, and he came upstairs and he just
in
ran.
Port Chicago.
Yeah, well, Port Chicago, Bay Point.
Bay Point it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
We came upstairs and we had the whole family there, and I got married.
Well, tell me,
Those were hard times too, you know, all my life. I've looked back and thought about it, and at no time, when I was a kid or all through those early years, was anything ever easy. As far as I was concerned, life was very hard. It was just a depression all the time. There was no work.
Yeah.
You know, if you got a job and
Well, now, wasn't there a little bit of a boom in the Roaring '20s?
no, there wasn't a boom, not then.
Not for no.
Because we could, Dad could do a number of things. You know, he'd had training as a machinist. He could do construction work. He'd worked in the oil refineries. He couldn't find a job anywhere.
Yeah.
And after we were married, we came here to Berkeley, and we lived with his mother for a while. And he couldn't get maybe a day's work or 2 days' work or something. So then decided to go down south and try down south, because Rob was down there then and had written and said that there was some work or other down there. So that's when we bought the old Ford for $15 and started out. You can imagine,
Yeah.
old $15 Ford. And Dad was, he was 23, I was 17. Oh, just happy as could be down there through the orange groves. You know, there were miles of orange groves then. Oh, I thought it was the most wonderful place in the world. And got down there and there was no work there,
Yeah.
nowhere. And so then there was a mining company in Anaconda Mine in Arizona, which was hiring people through the employment office down there. So they decided, there was one in New Mexico too. New Mexico is where we were headed for. So we decided to go there, get work. You traveled if you wanted a job, if you heard of a place that was hiring. So I don't remember how much money we had, but it wasn't very much. And we started out in this old Ford, and we got as far as Miami, Arizona, and that's in eastern Arizona. We got as far as there, and I think we had something like $1.50 left. We all went in. Was Rob in he had an old car too, and a little hopped up car, and we had our $15 Ford. And so we stopped at a little lunch stand, went in, we had a bowl of chili. That took the balance of our money.
Yeah.
But believe me, I don't know how we would have survived without your dad, the way he could maneuver things. He and Rob went up to the machine shop. It's a big mine. It's Anaconda Copper Company. They have a huge machine shop. They went up there and they got a job. Talked them into a job or out of a job. Then he got to inquiring around, who had any place to rent. And he went up, this old fellow, funny, he was called Speck. Old fellow had some apartments for rent. So we went up and talked him out of an apartment. And so there we moved in to an apartment.
With no money.
With no money. You could get an advance from the company store. They had company had a store. Yeah, the song you've heard Ernie Ford sing the store. So the company store. Well, that's just what happened in that. That's how it was in that town.
What town was this? Anaconda?
Miami.
Oh, Miami.
Miami, Arizona. Miami and Globe. You've heard of Globe.
Yes.
Well, they were just 4 miles apart,
Okay.
I think. But Anyway, there we were. We were heading for New Mexico.
You never made it to
Never
New
made it.
Mexico.
We stayed there and stayed there. I don't remember exactly how long it was. Must have been 6 to 8 months or something. We were there, and then we headed back to California.
Tell me a little bit about Dad's background and family.
Well-
Let's see, he was born Edwin Thomas Browne.
Edwin Thomas Browne. Yeah.
And what-
His father's name
his
was
birthday and-
Gary Thomas Browne.
He was born what?
He was born
Dad was
on
born December
14th.
14th,
1900.
1900, where in Leadville,
He was born in Leadville.
Colorado.
Yeah. Now his father and mother were both born in Ireland.
Do
And
you remember where? He told me. I remember.
His
but I can't
his
remember.
mother was born in County Clare, and I don't remember exactly where. And I don't know. I've forgotten where his father was born.
And her name was
Her name was Browne without the E before they
Nora.
were married. Eleonora.
Eleonora.
Yeah.
Oh, I always thought it was Nora.
Or Lenora, rather.
Lenora.
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 Lenora. And I don't know what her middle name
Were
was.
they married in Ireland?
No, they met in New York.
They met in New York.
Yeah. She came over. The McCormicks were cousins of hers. They were McCormicks. There was I don't know, somewhere in the 20s, there was some big politician in Chicago was her cousin, the McCormick. But at the time they were in New York, and apparently doing well. They had emigrated early or something and were doing well. So she was raised on a farm, and of course
Well, she came about what age? When she was a little
she
girl?
was no, she
From
was must have been 18, 16, 18,
When she
something like
came.
that. Yeah. And so she lived in New York, and this was where she met your grandfather. Now he came from apparently maybe a step up the ladder, upper middle class or something, because he had gone to the university. He graduated from the university
In the United
of
States?
Dublin. No, in Dublin.
Oh, in Dublin.
Yeah, he had graduated. So this put him, at that time, this put him in an entirely different class from her, who was raised on a farm. And she was the...
She was raised on a farm in Ireland.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had a farm. Because she used to tell me stories about walking to school and coming home and seeing the little people.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes, and she believed in them. She wasn't just talking either. She believed this.